So now let's move into the replete exterior formula. So the first formula here is, I wrote it again in this abbreviation. I'm also trying to I'm trying to make sure that AI is not scraping these if they get turned into images. Okay, so AI is not going to know what that is. Um, so this says 桂枝加荆芥方风白吉里汤. Okay, 桂枝加荆芥方风白吉里汤. Okay, and so this is a formula that was introduced by Feng Shilun, by Hu Xishu, and it was his alternative to this 桂枝麻黄各半汤 formula. Basically, a way to prescribe a formula like 桂枝麻黄各半汤 without using 麻黄. Okay. Um, and the thing is, this formula originally it was more, it's I would say it's almost primarily used more for eczema or for itchiness, but a lot of itchiness happens in rhinitis as well, and it's also a formula that works quite well in rhinitis. So um, let's look at just the symptoms here for 桂枝加荆芥方方白吉利汤. We will go into the dosage and stuff in a little bit. So first of all, it's a Guizhi formula, okay? It's Guizhi Tang plus Jingjie Fangfeng Baijili, right? And so it has a Guizhi Tang base. So in Guizhi Tang, a patient will sweat more easily. They won't be like a Ma Huang Tang sort of constitution where they're not very easily sweaty, okay? And the great thing about this formula is that it can accomplish some of the same things as a Ma Huang formula, but we don't have to worry so much about the contraindications of a Ma Huang formula where you shouldn't use it if a patient is sweating as much, right? Now, here are some other aspects of a Guizhi kind of constitution. So they might have a weaker constitution altogether. They might have pale, damp skin, pale lips, right? So sort of a weaker cardiovascular system. There might be thinner, tighter muscles, flat abdomen, and they can be prone to palpitations and anxiety. I will say that, this is not really always the case. I treat plenty of people that don't have a flat abdomen with Guizhi tongue formulas, and they do quite well, obviously. But this is a picture that someone like Huang Huang gives us of a sort of archetypical Guizhi tongue sort of person, right? Now, one of the key features with Guizhi Jia Jingjie Fangfeng Baijili Tang is this itchiness. So there can be itchiness in the nose and the eyes. Um, they might also have some kind of dermatitis. And so this itchiness and this hypersensitivity are prominent features of this formula, okay? Baijili, especially, is very well known for its ability to treat itchiness and hypersensitivity. Um, and that's part of what, makes this such a strong formula. All right. Now, what about the pulse for this formula? So for the pulse, again, the most prominent feature is going to be the left overflow. Okay, remember we said the left overflow, it signifies um, this exterior contraction in most cases. Okay, in the Chenjianguo system, the left side pulse represents upright qi pushing outwards from the chi to the guan to the cun position and to the left overflow. And each of the positions represents a burner of the body. So the chi representing the lower burner, the guan the middle burner, the cun the upper burner. Okay. Likewise, the right side represents the body eliminating downwards. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's eliminating fluid, room, feces, urine, whatever. It's this elimination downwards, including the heat that goes along with these things. Okay, or cold in some instances. So that's the theory behind the pulse. The other aspect of the pulse is the left side. The strength of the pulse can tell you either the strength of the strength of the pulse kind of tells you the strength of the upright chi's response. And then the left side will also tell you based upon, how thin it is or how wide it is, how big it is. It'll tell you how much in blood there is in the body. Okay. On the right side, the largeness, the size of the pulse, is it very small and thin or is it very, very large, will tell you the amount of yang in the body. Okay, so those are the two aspects. One is this idea of upright chi on the left. The right side is this elimination of various metabolic processes downwards. The other aspect is the yin blood on the right, on the left, and the yang on the right. Okay, is there a connection between these two different qualities that are measured on the left and right side? Yes, there are, but we can't really get into that in this course. So the most prominent feature is this left overflow. It can be a little tight due to the fact that we have Fangfeng, which is sort of standing in here for Ma Huang. Fangfeng and Jingjie together, they're sort of combined with Guizhi, they're sort of standing in for Ma Huang. But overall, it's not as strong a pulse. It's not as tight a pulse, and it can be floating and moderate still. Okay. Now it can also have a flitting pulse, either that sort of tight flitting pulse, or it can jump a little bit further, which can be due to the fact that you have this Baijili in the formula. So flitting, if you think about it, this flitting left and right, or lateral to medial, medial to lateral, it's due to either pushing out against accumulation, upright chi or heat pushing out against accumulation of phlegm blood, stagnation and blockage, or it's against cold exterior contraction. Okay. So in this case, it would be more pushing out against this accumulation, phlegm, blood, stagnation, this blockage, right? And a little bit of cold exterior contraction because chili is still, it's mostly a bitter, warm herb, but it has a little bit of acrid nature as well. So bitter can purge that accumulation, phlegm, and blood stagnation. Now, the other left side pulses, they might be weaker. So you might not feel as strong a pulse, for instance, in the Guan position, the Chi position, or you might not feel as strong a pulse when you push down on the pulse, okay? Indicating that the body's deeper resources that we hold in the middle burner and the lower burner are sort of depleted to a degree. Not to the degree of a Shaoyin presentation, but Guizhi is considered the weaker constitution of the Guizhi versus Ma Huang, right? That being said, there can be a little bit of tightness in the left Chi. Again, this is due to Fangfeng, which has this ability to expel the cold pathogen from the lower burner, okay? Now it can also have right overflow as well, and that's due to the presence of this Baijili. Or sometimes it's called Jili because it's actually it looks like it's a seed, and that's a Liu Jingbo experience. And it makes sense to a degree, like because we said Jili is a warm, bitter herb primarily, and bitter has the ability to purge downwards, okay? Whereas acrid has the ability to push up and outwards. So he said downward elimination is more on the right side. So now we'll get into the abdominal aspect here. So for the abdomen, uh, they can have a Guizhi style abdomen, which is sort of tight at the surface, but then it yields weak under pressure, or it's weak on the sides, off to the sides of the rectus abdominis. Sometimes people will say it feels kind of like a balloon. So it just kind of yields under that pressure while being tight at the surface. Um, and of course, in Guizhi sort of presentations, you can have a more prominent abdominal aorta pulsation. Okay, that's another thing you can feel for. Now, as for the tongue, I'll just mention this once that a Guizhi tongue is pale red. Typically, it might be somewhat wet, thin coating, soft and supple. So, um, in the case of tongue here, it's not that I necessarily absolutely, have to see a perfect match of a Guizhi tongue. It's more that I don't want to see other things, right? You know, I don't want to see a really red tongue um, that has, this real thick coating on it, the thick yellow coating with a red tongue, right? I know it's which would sort of point to this more uh, a heat presentation, a stronger heat presentation, and if it was really dry again, um, you can do things with it with additions, but it's more ruling that out, right? So the dose for this formula, this Guizhi Jingjie Fangfeng Baijili Tang, I'm just giving this is a recommended dose. This is not a standard dose or whatever. This is just um, a typical dose that you could give for, again, this is for raw herbs. If you're decocting your formula, so you can use Guizhi 9, Baishao 9, Shengjiang 6, Dazao 5 pieces, Gantao 6 grams, Jingjie 9 grams. That has to be put in after towards the end within the last 5 to 10 minutes of the decoction. In Fangfeng, at 9 grams. Jilizi, you can go 9 to 15. You can go a little bit higher with Jilizi. But it is important to note that Jilizi, it has a what's called like a pull um, uh, quality to it. Pull is penetrating, and this is part of this has to do with the shape of Jilizi has lots of thorns on it. And so it's important to know that Jilitsu over time it can be a little bit depleting of chi. Okay, so it can deplete upright chi to a degree because of its poor nature. So the other thing I wanted to just discuss very quickly here um, is the granules because a lot of people are using granules nowadays, right? Um, and the thing that you really need to be aware of with granules, maybe all of you are already aware of this, but I think from what I've seen, people are not, is that all granule manufacturers, they're going to give you different um, concentrations of the herbs. Okay, so um, an example, for instance, at my clinic, we have this problem now in Taiwan where the granule manufacturers, for a variety of reasons, they don't always have every herb. So sometimes you have to go shopping around to different granule manufacturers. So in my clinic, my current clinic, it's a big problem is we might have like 4 or 5 different manufacturers um, going at once. And so sometimes I have to call down to the pharmacy and say, hey, listen, what is our current Guizhi manufacturer? The reason why I have to ask that is why? Because one of the manufacturers, Keda, it has a concentration of 1 gram of granule is equal to 5 grams of raw Guizhi. The other one, Tianming, I think only has a concentration of 1 to 3. And so that really affects how I'm prescribing. So you absolutely need to be aware of this because all of the different manufacturers have different concentrations. The other thing that you can know about this is that typically herbs that have high aromatic components uh, will have a higher concentration. So Guizhi has a higher concentration. 5 is pretty good. Another one is like ginger. Ginger has oftentimes a 1 to 10. Okay, so if you if you go by your standard, oh, I'm just going to use however much granule, you might use too much ginger. And ginger is already the modern ginger is already much stronger than the ginger that was used theoretically that was used in the Shanghanlun. Okay, so in the Shanghanlun they used probably something called Xiaohuangjiang, which is still available today, and it's not quite as strong if you taste it. So now we're going to look at some additions. I screwed up here. I'll start with 吃小豆. This is a common. These additions are really good for most of the formulas that I'm going to talk about here for rhinitis. So this is a very, very important slide. So make sure you're really paying attention for this slide. So 吃小豆is a an herb that's used a lot by Feng Shilun. Okay, he uses 吃小豆 当归汤 a lot in a lot of mucosal and dermatological inflammatory conditions. Okay, and so for 吃小豆, you want to see uh, like a right overflow pulse that's a little bit slippery and taps up on the finger. Okay, so we'll have that sort of popping up on the finger feel to it, as opposed to you have to kind of feel down. Um, Now, why is this the case? Well, 吃小豆 is a very interesting herb. Okay, so there's this quote in Chinese here that I put from one of the great Bentao commentators. And basically what he's saying is that 吃小豆, what it does is it infuses fire into water, allowing water to move. Infusing water into fire so that fire doesn't steam out of control. So if you get this heat that's sort of out of control, what it can do is um, steam out fluids and cause things like exudation and and sweating. If you have stagnant fluid, it can also lead to exudate and sweating, right? If you if you fuse that fire into water, now the water is moving and flowing, and so it's not going to stagnate there and then ooze out as exudate, and the fire is now able to transform that water so it's getting used up and it doesn't push outwards, right? And so that's sort of embodying in this idea of, well, you have a slippery, which is this water that's sort of stagnant, this sort of room situation. And then you have this tapping up on the finger, this strong pulse, which is embodying that sense of fire which moves upwards. Okay. So you're often going to see this inflamed mucosa. and more copious exudate with 吃小豆. And you can use a higher dose with 吃小豆because it's just a bean. All right. 15, 24 grams is fine for 吃小豆. For Xixin, this is very important. Xixin is felt on the left shi, and it's usually a sunken, tight pulse on the left shi. It might be stronger. It shouldn't be too weak if you're feeling it, okay? At least in my opinion, because Xixin is an acrid, warm herb. It really its job is to push out a pathogen. And so you want to make sure that there's a strong pathogen there and a strong response to it. Now, Xixin is also, we can think of it a little bit like a jueyin kind of herb. And so you might feel this pain in the inguinals upon pressing. And then you might see a slight thin mucus coating on the tongue. This is different from a regular coating. Mucus means there's a little bit of coagulation of the fluid, okay? The tongue can be pale and damp. And Shixin is an herb that unblocks the orifices. So if we have congestion, nasal congestion, it's very good